All right, so welcome to day 2, session 1B, the data information session. My name is Ingrid Stevens. I'll be your moderator today. I oversee the injury prevention program at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. Today we will first hear from Hillary Strayer, who is the prevention specialist with the injury prevention program at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. Hillary's session title is Supporting Alaska Tribal Injury with Facts and Figures, the Alaska Native Injury Atlas. Please help me welcome Hillary Strayer.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let me try to share my screen now. Apologies, I'm a little bit new to this program. So as I said, my name is Hillary Strayer. I work with Ingrid at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium in Anchorage, Alaska, and I really appreciate this opportunity to tell you about the Alaska Native Injury Atlas, which is an epidemiological report or booklet that ANTHC has updated every 5 years. The 3rd edition was completed in the spring of last year, and in a year or so, we'll start work on the next edition. Injuries are the leading cause of are a leading cause of fatalities and hospitalizations for Alaska Native people. We provide the atlas to describe and identify the leading causes of injury, fatalities, and hospitalizations for Alaska Native and American Indian people in Alaska. It's a tool that we specifically develop for the tribal IP staff around the state so that they can use it in whatever their endeavors are. The data show how the rates differ geographically, by age and gender, and how the causes trend over time. Data are reported as frequencies and age-adjusted rates where possible. Results are suppressed for frequencies when the count is below 5, and rates are not reported for frequencies below 10. Statistical significance differences between specific rates were determined using chi-square and mental Hensel tests. Sorry, this is advancing automatically. Okay. We greatly appreciate our partners, the data partners that I work with all the time, who provided the data specifically for the Atlas project. The Alaska Trauma Registry and the Alaska Health Facilities Data Reporting Program for hospitalization data, the Alaska Health Analytics and Vital Records Program for fatalities or deaths, and the Alaska Department of Labor for population. We tend to use that. We consider those population data more accurate than just strictly using the US Census. For hospitalizations and fatal injuries in the Atlas, we reported on total intentional injuries, total unintentional injuries, and the leading 5 or 6 individual causes for each of those categories. Regional rates for leading causes of hospitalizations and fatalities are displayed on maps created in ArcGIS, with the darker colors indicating the higher rates and white indicating unreportable rates due to low numbers of cases. This map indicates that regions with a higher age-adjusted rates of all-terrain vehicle injury hospitalizations appear to be those not connected to central Alaska by roads, where ATVs are more used for daily transport and not for recreation. And when we do this atlas, there's actually a category of the codes that are used to categorize the causes. We use the ICD, International Classification of Diseases, to categorize the injuries. They have categories of off-road vehicles or land vehicles other. Because of the nature of vehicle use in Alaska, we actually identify and break down ATVs and snow machines because those are integral to different regions of Alaska. So we get a little more specific than what some of the standard classifications are. We also look at the leading causes of injury. For each of the leading causes of injury, We report them by the rates by 5-year periods, starting in the 1992 to 1996 period and going to the 2012 to 2016 period to show trends over time. And as you can see here, it can vary substantially over time. Sometimes those variances can be artificial. For poisoning, there were some coding changes that happened between the 2002, 2006, and 2007 to 2011 that made some of the artificial increase, but some of that is also an increase due to opioids. So we also provide the data as bar charts showing rates by 10-year age groups and by gender, so that people can see the differences both by gender and both as it progresses over time. This graph shows the fall injury hospitalization rates, and clearly starting around age 49, there is an increase in the hospitalizations for falls that is directly related to age. For this particular atlas, we added a special topic category. In rural Alaska, there are critical resource limitations for TBI treatment and therapy in rural communities. In response to a number of queries from tribal organizations and also from ANTHC about traumatic brain injuries, including increased concerns about youth on off-road vehicles, a special section on these injuries and their causes and prevention efforts was included. In 2012 to 2016, the TBI rate for Alaska Native American Indian people was double the national rate. Patients 70 and older had the highest rate of TBI. This is related to the increased number of falls that occur, as we saw in the previous chart. And there was a high frequency of pediatric TBI, due to ATV crashes that were noted by staff at the Alaska Native Medical Center, which led to a collaboration between our program and tribal organization and the Alaska Native Medical Center to develop an ATV safety toolkit for junior high and high school students. We also looked at the causes of traumatic brain injury, what the most frequent causes were, and the two leading causes were falls and motor vehicle crashes. Again, the highest risk age group were those age 70 and older. 80% of the TBI for age 70 and older were caused by a fall. So clearly this helps identify for the different regions what types of prevention efforts to focus on for different age groups. The Alaska Native Injury Atlas, since it was first printed in 2008, it has been used as a resource for many efforts by tribal and nonprofit organizations, both within and outside of Alaska, to provide data needed for injury prevention grant applications by regional tribal organizations. Most recently, it was used by 3 tribal organizations in Alaska to help them write the Tribal Injury Prevention Cooperative Agreement grants for that IHS provides. It's a 5-year grant, and all 3 of those regions received funding. It also helps for planning and prioritization of injury prevention efforts. It is also used as a data source for peer-reviewed papers and articles, both inside and outside of Alaska. It has been used as an example by the Indian Health Services to guide other tribal areas planning to develop their own injury atlases, and as a data and information source for outreach materials to raise community awareness of injury concerns. Sorry about the advancing. Each edition of the Alaska Native Injury Atlas was able to be developed only through a collaboration between the Epidemiology Center at ANTHC and the Injury Prevention Program. This current edition combined the efforts of Ian Blake, a biostatistician, Christine Tate, who did all the beautiful formatting of the atlas, and Dr. Ellen Provost, who provided support and some analysis from the Epidemiology Center. And then Ingrid Stevens, the Injury Prevention Program Manager, and myself. Both in the Injury Prevention Program. The Alaska Native Injury Atlas can be accessed at the Alaska Native Epidemiology Center website at the bottom of this slide. And that is it. Thank you for watching my presentation.
Thank you, Hillary. Just a reminder, if you do have questions for either Hillary or Dr. Sarah Nash, we'll be holding for questions at the end of the session. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Sarah Nash, who is the previous Director of Cancer Surveillance with the Alaska Native Epidemiology Center. Dr. Nash's title presentation is Cancer in Alaska Native People, the 50-Year Report. Please help me welcome Dr. Sarah Nash.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'm going to share my screen. So I'm actually going to tell you about another report that that we put together at the Center. And let me see if I can share my, I hope you all are now seeing my presentation. So I'm going to be telling you about another report that we put together at the Epicenter. This is the 50-year report on cancer among Alaska Native people. As Ingrid said, I am the former director of the Alaska Native Tumor Registry. I'm currently in the process of moving to the University of Iowa. And our current director, who has now come on board, Lena Roy, she actually is in this session too. So between her and I think we can probably get to any of your questions. So I want to start by just sharing one of the reasons why we're interested in cancer among Alaska Native people, and that is because 1 in 5 deaths among Alaska Native people is due to cancer. So cancer is the leading cause of mortality among Alaska Native people, and it also is a leading cause of morbidity. Cancer is the 3rd leading cause of potential life loss, accounting for 12%. And I actually realized, just as I was preparing to give this talk today, that these figures are from the previous mortality update, because the most recent mortality update has been released in the last couple of weeks. So just if anybody's interested in that too, that's another piece of information that we have at the Epicenter that might be useful for some of you too. So cancer is a leading cause of both morbidity and mortality for Alaska Native people. And in 1974, actually, Dr. Anne Lanier, in collaboration with colleagues from the National Cancer Institute and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, established the Alaska Native Tumor Registry with data going back to 1969, really to try and understand the burden of cancer among Alaska Native people, and really to try and understand what the pattern is of cancer, what cancers Alaska Native people experience more commonly and less commonly than their US white counterparts. And since that time, we have been putting together a 5-year report every 5 years since 1969. And we released our 50-year report back in about a month ago now. And this report shares 50 years of data from the cancer surveillance system in Alaska, sharing information on cancer among Alaska Native people back from 1969 to 2018. And I just want to say, before I go ahead and show you kind of some of the report, that this is a really, the long history of surveillance that we have among Alaska Native people is something to celebrate, because we really, I don't think that there are many cancer registries in the country or even the world that have this really long history. There are some for sure, but the number of registries that have this long history of data is very small. So the fact that we have this information that we're able to put together for Alaska Native people, I think is a really wonderful thing to help us improve the health of Alaska Native people. So I want to tell you a little bit about the report. I want to start by telling you what's new in the report. So we have updated the data. We include now the most recent years of data. And for those who are unfamiliar with cancer surveillance, it takes a little bit of time for us to collect cancer information for our cancer patients. And the reason for that is, you know, the patient has to be diagnosed, they have to go through the complete diagnosis process, then they have to be treated, and then it takes a little bit of time for us to gather all that information into one place in a process we call abstracting. So we're typically 2 years behind, the cancer surveillance system is typically 2 years behind the current calendar year. And so our current, most recent up-to-date information is for the calendar year 2018. So we've got the most recent updated data in this report. And then I'll walk you through some of the sections that we have in the report and that we've updated, including regional rates, leading cancers, 50-year cancer trends, and also some data on cancer mortality. So just to start, and as I go through this, I don't usually do this, but I wanted to actually show you the pages from the report. Usually I kind of draw the figures from scratch and make them look a little nicer for the PowerPoint slide. But what I really wanted to do with this presentation is to give you a sense of what the report looks like, so that when you are going to the report, and I'll also show you how to get the report, you really have, so that you feel oriented, so that what you're seeing in this presentation is exactly what you're seeing in the report itself. And so that should give you a better sense of kind of what you can expect to find when you go to the report. So one of the main sections that we have right up front in the report is the section on leading cancers. And this is kind of what that section looks like. So we start off by sharing the leading cancers among Alaska Native people. And just to orient you to what we're looking at here, we have the figure title on the left. That's very consistent throughout the report. You should be able to orient yourself to what figure you're looking at by looking at that title there. And then typically we have information for Alaska Native people in a darker blue and US whites in a lighter blue. That does change slightly throughout the report, but you can always figure out who we're talking about by looking at this legend that we have above the figure. And in this figure here, what I'm showing you is the leading cancers among Alaska Native people.
Hi, everyone. This is Hillary. I'm just going to run with it. We seem to have lost several people and we're waiting. If anybody has questions about the injury atlas, please type them in the chat or in Q&A, and I'll try to monitor them. I actually missed a couple of slides. The sections that we have in the injury atlas, there's first a section on injury hospitalizations. There's a second section on injury fatalities, and each of those have the 5 causes.
All right.
Sorry, Sarah.
Okay, I'm going to hang. I've got IT on the phone helping me. I'm going to hang up with you now so that I can present to the keep on going. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. It's very hard to see that I've disconnected with the PowerPoint in full view. Hillary, were you answering questions? Did I interrupt you?
I was just offering. I was trying to sort of fill in a little bit. So you came in right at the
sorry, everyone. Thank you. Can somebody jump in and tell me where you lost me? What slide were we looking at? The age-adjusted rates. Okay, thank you. So let me go back to that slide, and I'll share my screen. I'm really sorry, everybody. Our internet connection here seems to disconnect itself at the most inopportune of times. So my sincerest apologies. Okay, so I don't quite know where you dropped out here, but one of the things I wanted to point out from this slide is that we can kind of begin to see here some of the cancers for which we find that they're more common or less common among Alaska Native people. And since I know we're kind of running short on time, I'll kind of leave it at that with that slide, because we have a couple of other things that I wanted to get to. In terms of cancer trends, we do have in Chapter 4, we have some figures that go through cancer trends. And I should say for this For this particular chapter, I'm showing you here the trends for all sites. You can see that in the figure legend, but we do actually have these figures for all the leading cancers. And again, the pattern here is that in the darker blue, we have the information for Alaska Native people, and in the lighter blue, we have the information for US whites. And you can see from this slide here that the pattern has been actually relatively consistent between Alaska Native people and US whites. There was an increase from the late 70s kind of to the late 90s, early 2000s. From that time, the rates have been fairly consistent among Alaska Native people. There's been a slight decline among US whites, and it's possible that we might be seeing a start of a similar decline among Alaska Native people, but it's a little early to tell at this time. And as I said, if you're able to look at the report, we do have these trends for all different cancer sites, and so you can see just exactly how things vary for all the different leading cancer sites. I wanted to share a little bit of information on cancer by age. Again, we have this information here I'm sharing you, showing you information for all sites, but we have all of this information for all different leading cancer sites. And as we would expect, incidence of cancer does increase by age. And again, here on the x-axis, you have the age category. On the y-axis, you have the age-adjusted incidence rate. You can see that the rates are fairly similar between Alaska Native people and US white people for all sites by age. Again, obviously, this varies by cancer site. So I encourage you to go to the report and take a look at the cancer site-specific information. One of the things that's new this year in this report is cancer stage at diagnosis. So we actually have included some frequency figures showing different stage at diagnosis for all sites that I'm showing you here, as well as for different cancer-specific sites. And what we're showing you here is what we're defining as localized. So this is what we call SEER summary stage. So localized means the cancer hasn't spread from its area of origin. Regional means that the cancer may have spread from its initial organ of origin, but it has not spread beyond the region of the body. And then distant means that the cancer has metastasized. And so we can see for example, about 40% of all cancers among Alaska Native people are diagnosed at that really early stage, whereas about 25 to 30% are diagnosed at the distant stage. And why this is important is that we really want to see more cancers diagnosed at that localized stage, because that means that these cancers tend to be a little bit easier to treat with lower impact on quality of life and a greater chance of treatment being successful and curative. And so you can see, again, if we were to go to the cancer site-specific analyses for these, you can see, for example, that sites such as lung cancer, there's a much larger proportion of those cancers are diagnosed at distant stage. Whereas, for example, breast cancer, almost 90% of breast cancers are diagnosed at that earlier stage. In terms of cancer mortality, again, we're showing you cancer mortality trends. Here, again, in the dark line, you have trends for Alaska Native people, and in the light blue for US white people. And you can see from this figure that the mortality trends only go back to the mid-90s, because that's when we really started collecting that good mortality data within the registry. You can see that mortality had been fairly stable among Alaska Native people, but it did decline in the most recent 5-year time period, which we're really excited to see, and we kind of hope that decline continues. And you can also see the mortality is higher among Alaska Native people compared to US whites. So that's something, as that rate comes down among Alaska Native people, that disparity is decreasing, and so we hope that continues. We also want to, and one of the things that I wanted to really spend a few moments on here is regional information, because I know that that's really important to our local tribal health partners. And so I wanted to really orient you to what you might expect to find in the report for your region. We have regional information in 2 different sections of the report. So in chapter 2, this is our leading cancers chapter. Again, you can tell it's chapter 2 because the figure is 2.40. So this is the 40th figure in chapter 2. And what we do in these figures, we have figures that look like this for all of the leading cancer sites. And it's just a comparison of all of the different rates for all of the different regions. And then this lighter blue line here is the average statewide rate. So you can see how your region compares to other regions as well as to that statewide average. And again, I'm showing you this for female breast cancer this time, but we have this for several of the leading cancers in the report. We also then have chapter 7 that goes over information specifically. Each region has a couple of different pages in this chapter where you can get some more detailed information for your region. So here we're showing you the incidence rate trends over time for your region. We have regional data going back to 1994. So again, we're not able to go back to that full 50-year period for the regional data, but we do present to you at least 20 years of information so that you can see those longer term trends. And what we're doing here is we've got the figure that shows those trends at the top and then the table that corresponds to that figure down below, so you can see the counts and the rates. And then in the next page for each region, we're showing you information for specific cancer sites for your region. So we've got the age-adjusted incidence rates here. We've got in the darker blue, that's the regional rate, and we're comparing them to the statewide average in the lighter blue. Excuse me. And then again, we've got the information that makes up that figure in the table below. So you have the more specific information, the counts and the rates for your region there. I wanted to show you where you can find the report. So I'm just going to come back and click and make sure that I'm still connected. It looks like I am. So I wanted to show you where you can find the report. And you can find the report in a couple of different ways. So here I've navigated to the Alaska Native Epidemiology Center's webpage. So this is anthctoday.org/epicenter. So this is the Alaska Native Epidemiology Center's website. And from here, there are a couple of different ways that you can get to the 50-year report if you'd like to kind of go in a little bit more detail and read the report yourself. You can, right now it's under the news because it's still fairly new. We've got this 50-year report link here. But I also wanted to show you another different way you can get there by clicking on publications. And part of the reason I wanted to show you this is because you can see all of the wonderful reports that we've got from the Epicenter, including the injury atlas that Hillary just talked to us about, and the mortality report, which I talked a little bit about at the beginning of the talk. But here you can see our Cancer and Alaska Native People 50-year report, and you can download the full report from here. So you can just click on the report, and then one of the really nice things that we have in here is that you can actually scroll through. We have these bookmarks included, so you can find the specific information that you're looking for by section of the report. So I think that is all I had. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That is all I had for the report, but if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer them. I know we also might have some questions for Hillary, so thank you very much.